This is the Bigme B1 Pro Max Plus Color, and in my first thoughts I said that it was a really promising device, but maybe not quite ready for the Western market. This is my full review, and I'm going to base that on what it is now and try not to admire what it could be. But Bigme is a company with noble aims. Why not find Norris from Bigme on Twitter, and you can read this exact post. Bigme's tagline is "Make me stronger," and Bigme wants to be known as one of the pioneers of color e-ink. I talked about that in my first video. Is color e-ink ready? I am certainly going to be recommending this device to people in the business or professional world who need to go to a lot of meetings and collaborate with a lot of people. It's a really strong device for communicating as well. So for instance, one of the standout features is actually the meeting recording to text, and I'll demonstrate that in the collaboration section of this review. Today, as normal, I'm going to go through all of these different uses, talk about what I think of the Bigme B1 Max Plus Color against those. I'm going to give them a score out of 10 in each one. If you're interested in this compared to other devices, then why not check out evaluateeverything.co.uk, where I'm compiling all of my reviews and all of the scores that I'm giving in these different categories. So if there's one of these use cases that's most important to you, you'll be able to use that table to cross-reference which e-ink device is best for you. This is a Kaleido Plus color screen, and it does have a higher resolution in black and white than it does in color, and you can definitely notice that lower resolution with the color sometimes. I'll talk about that later in the video. But you do still have that high resolution with the black and white screen, and so for reading, this is still a really strong device. For thinking, the Notes app is good, and I've had lots of comments recently that people use color in their notes to organize their thoughts, and I can tell you that actually I quite enjoy that as well. Using different colors for different ideas within a notes document is really quite useful. I will say though that when you're using a pen with a color, because of the low resolution, it does look a bit pixelated at times. So you may want to mainly use a black pen to actually write and then use color to ring and highlight different aspects. But you can still write in the color. Of course, there's a browser on here which is useful for thinking because you'll be able to reference things, and yep, that is suited far better to color than it is to an e-ink screen. And you can install any app here from Google Play. So if you use other apps, like for instance I use Trello, then they do work better with a full color screen. You can install any browser that you like from Google Play. For instance, I've gone for Firefox. I'm going to give it 8 out of 10 for thinking. It is a really good place for your thoughts. It's got the ability to use color to organize your thinking, but it's also importantly going to integrate well with any app that you use on Google Play. For learning, for reading is really excellent because it does have the high resolution black screen, and you can use things like color highlights, and you can see color figures, and with full color PDFs it's still very quick to do the page turns, and it's a pleasure to read on this device. You can also of course add annotations and highlights in color, which is very useful. Continuing this idea about learning, it's not just about reading. Because of the color e-ink screen, it's suited far better to e-learning modules, which many of us in professions have to do these days. It's nice to work on here, but don't expect it to be a pleasure to watch videos or any animations with very rapidly changing colors on this screen. And there is, like all e-ink tablets, sometimes an issue with contrast of images or text on color fields, which is actually designed to be viewed on an LCD screen. It doesn't always show up as it should on an e-ink tablet screen. It's really lovely for that more sedate kind of normal reading and learning. It's a really nice screen for that. So I would give learning 6 out of 10. Collaboration is a real strong suit for this device. It's designed for that. The meeting notes that I alluded to at the start is a great way to work with other people, and it's a great idea for using an e-ink tablet that I hadn't really thought of before. There are an array of microphones at the top here. You can actually record a full meeting. It will transcribe that meeting, and it will keep the notes that you draw on the screen along with that meeting. And you can share just as simply as using a QR code or a link. So that'd be useful for sharing with your colleagues in the meeting as a record of what was discussed, or for sharing with somebody who wasn't in the meeting who needs to actually know what was discussed. You could also use this to give instructions to your colleagues, for instance, maybe drawing a schematic diagram of what they need to do whilst explaining out loud, and it's going to transcribe the instructions as well. It keeps a recording of your voice and delivers the pictures that you've drawn at the same time. The other thing I think a lot of people will be thinking about for collaboration is things like Microsoft apps. I'll be very interested when they work out a way to perfectly integrate OneNote with e-ink devices, and it's almost there. Word and PowerPoint, they look great in full color, especially with using the different colors means that you can now see all the buttons really clearly and there's no issue with contrast there. But OneNote so that it feels natural when you're making notes with the pen on OneNote. They use this clever global handwriting function, which is accessed by the pencil at the top here. It actually gives you a layer over the top of OneNote which you're drawing on, and which shows up instantly just like in the Notes app. And then it prints that into OneNote. So it avoids that kind of lag which you get if you draw directly into OneNote. You can do that if you wish. If you want to have fluent taking of notes and then it printing into OneNote, that's a good way to bridge that gap between the Eink device and the software that's designed for the LCD screens. The pen only works to do the pen input, and you still have the ability to touch the screen and use any of the icons with your finger. So it does take a little bit of getting used to, but if you're someone that really wants to use OneNote along with an Eink tablet, I would say this is one of the best integrations that you can get so far. There is that thing, there is an extra press to actually turn it into that mode, whereas in the Boox devices what they're doing is they're actually automatically switching to that mode when you open OneNote. You can also load in .xls and PowerPoint files and they work perfectly fine. This is a strength of these devices. You can of course use Microsoft apps to access any file types, or you can download other Android apps which will access those same file types and edit them in a variety of ways. So there are many possibilities in the way you can use this to access your Office files and collaborate. I'm going to give this an 8 out of 10 because this is a strength of the device for collaboration. Communication is another strong suit of this device. You can tell this has been designed for a business person who maybe has to work with people who speak different languages. For instance, there is pre-installed a translator app which will accurately use the microphone array to translate your voice into any different language. And it's pretty accurate in terms of actually picking up exactly what I'm saying, as you can see. At the moment though, that translator app is only really working between Chinese and another language. So I can show you that it's picking up my English okay. I'm not really sure if it's translating it well into Chinese, but you tell me if you speak Chinese. But of course, because it's an open Android system, as one of the things that they're keen to point out about this is it's a full Android tablet with a color Eink screen. You can of course use any other translation software you like. For instance, of course, you can lean into the Google Translator world. Once more, in the communication section, making use of that full Android tablet capability, you can use any email app that you like, or indeed any chat app that you like. If you, for instance, you like to use Slack or WeChat for your work. You wouldn't want to use this for video calls. Well, there's no camera at all on it, let alone a front-facing one, but you could, at a pinch, access a video meeting if you needed to. So it's not perfect for communication, but it is good, and out of the Eink tablets, it's a strong one. I'm going to give it 7 out of 10. Planning is another strong suit of the device. It has a built-in task list, which you can actually use voice recognition to generate tasks. And that's a useful thing to put at the top of the device, really quickly accessed, that you can actually build up your own to-do list and check them off as completed tasks as you go. Now, of course, if you use a different app like Google Keep, or as I use Trello to move your tasks around and work through complex cycles of work, then you can do this on this device. Again, it comes down to being able to choose your app. Once more, calendar apps, and they work really well on this lovely screen. Just make notes of things that I need to do as and when, but I really prefer to be able to access my calendar on a dedicated work device when I'm thinking about my actual processes to do with work, not just what I need to do for my own personal life, for instance, which I can access on my own phone. Of course, I keep my planning on a PDF which I annotate with the pen, and I'm liking using it for planning with that PDF. It works just fine with the hyperlinks, and annotating works just as well as any other Eink reader. Of course, you've then got the color. You could maybe use one color for your forward planning, the things that you've thought about in advance that week. You could use a red for urgent things, or you could use a bluer color for just some notes to add around that. And you can of course highlight things in different color as well in that app. So for planning, I'm going to give it 7 out of 10. Innovating is the final one. Now for me, for color Eink, what I'm really looking forward to is using it for drawing and artwork. To take full advantage of the color screen, they really want to make a dedicated drawing app. There is an animation app, and maybe that's really good, but it's all in Chinese and I can't work it out. And I think that might be a third-party one. But I'd really love to see not just Bigme, but all Eink tablet creators actually make dedicated drawing apps separate from the notes. So it's a bit of a missed opportunity there, because you can only access, I think, 20 colors, whereas the screen can make more than 200 colors. You can see that it can display photos really nicely, actually. It doesn't look necessarily like it does on an LCD screen, but maybe that's okay. Maybe it looks like it's printed out on some paper here on the Eink tablet screen. I really like that actual look. For innovating, color does suit creative thought. It suits creative people. But I do think that if there's a way to select any color in that Notes app very, very quickly, it would be a far better device for creative people. I'm only going to give it a 5 for innovating. More of a you've missed out on this one than a it's terrible. But just as with all Android tablets, it could suit not creative individuals who are into drawing or writing, but creative individuals who design user experiences. And I'd love to see people picking this up as user experience designers, because once people start actually making Android apps dedicated for color e-ink screens, we will see this technology really take off. So my conclusions then, here's the scores. There's lots to love about this device, but there are a few missed opportunities. And there's probably a few that I've missed or some issues that I've encountered because I don't speak Chinese. And although this has an English operating system, there are still some times when it reminds you that it's an international device with Chinese at the heart of it. It's a device with a color e-ink screen, and you're right to wonder if color e-ink is ready yet. Watch my video here if you're interested in that. You'll sacrifice definition in your text for color, and you'll also sacrifice a little bit of contrast for color. You'll also find that the whole color screen refreshing is quite off-putting. There are different modes which get around that, and they're perfectly fine, but then you'll get more ghosting if you use the speed modes that doesn't do that global refresh. And the way these pixels work, some colors appear to mix better, and some they don't really appear to be a very natural tone of what they were aiming for. For instance, some oranges, you can tell that it's yellow and red dots rather than being a wash of orange color. That might be why they've limited it to certain colors rather than allowing you access to the full palette. But right now, color e-ink is a nice to have alongside the perfectly clear black and white screen. The different screen modes, they just change how often it refreshes and the definition of the pixels. So the HD mode looks great if you only need to change the whole screen at once. For instance, you're flicking through an academic document or a magazine or something like this. But if you need to scroll like you're working through a web page, then the speed mode is what you want to use. However, the ghosting is quite apparent on the speed mode. So they missed out for me in not providing a drawing app that allows you to work with all colors in a range of different brushes. You can install third-party apps, but then you have the issue where they aren't updating, they aren't registering the pen immediately, and you're kind of having that lag, or you're going to use their global handwriting input mode, and then you're not really seeing what you're drawing as you're drawing it, but it's printing in afterwards. One other thing about the screen is because it is darker, you are going to rely on using the front lights more and running them brighter, and that's going to impact on your battery life as well. I don't think though that color e-ink is slow. I've read a lot of reports that color ink is slow to load, and I haven't noticed that. There are times when I've installed really very large books with really high resolution drawings and it's been slow to move about those, but that would be slow to load on any tablet with this specification of processor. It isn't the screen that's causing that. The pen is cool. I really like the idea of having the 3 buttons and that you can map them, although I don't know why it's old school micro USB for the charger rather than it being USB-C, which the actual device itself charges on. They give you a cable for USB-C to micro USB. I can imagine there are times when I'm not going to have that with me and I'm just going to have to use the pen as a stylus rather than the buttons on here. And some of the button functions, well, they're very useful, and there aren't necessarily very easy to access replacements of those on the screen because they're presuming that you've got the button on the stylus. It does snap to the side of the device well. The actual feel of the pen is perfectly fine. It is good, of course, that the pen will still work because it is a Wacom stylus. The actual charging isn't for the nib, it's just for the Bluetooth buttons. And that of course means you can use any Wacom EMR pen with this device. I have certainly been proved wrong when I said in my e-ink tablet buying guide that there were many Chinese white label companies that just produce e-ink tech which is just totally generic. If that is the case, and there are those companies, Bigme isn't one of them, because this is a actually very well thought through device with some clear aims around business people and professionals who need to use a tablet purely for work and want some very specific business features. Maybe Bigme saw that and actually wanted to send me a device to prove that this isn't just a blank copy with little consideration. This is a well thought through device. They're a company with big and noble aims. They're already, I've noticed in the time that I've been using this device, put out several quite large updates for the usability of this device. I'm excited at the prospect of Bigme going forward. So let me know if you have any questions. If there's anything that I didn't answer for you in this review of the Bigme, I'll try and answer them in the comments, and I'll also try and answer them in any future videos that feature the Bigme, including comparisons with other e-ink devices that are all coming soon. and I think it might have a place in one of my top 5s, so let's watch this space for that.